Mr. Hendrickson,
Here.
Mr. Costin,
Here, by phone.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Here.
Mr. Redlinger,
Here.
Mr. Steen, have you been able to join yet?
Here. Yep, got on.
Thank you. I don't see Mr. Gehrig. I do not see Ms. McCall. We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Don. Next order of business is the approval of the minutes of February 24th. This is an actionable item. Is there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, Mayor Mahoney,
Yes.
I'd like to make some corrections to the minutes on page 8. It said I made some comments, and on the second paragraph, it says, Dr. Mahoney voiced his concern regarding utilization of firm from Edina, Minnesota, and the fact that they don't understand North Dakota bonding. I would rather have them bonding the legislative issues. It was just the legislator I was concerned about, them not being totally connected with them. And much as I love Ireland, the consultant is in Iceland, not Ireland. I'd love to have it from Ireland, but it's Iceland. And then my other comment is just that the Governor Walston specifically is not the specific reason we're using people local. That's a P3 contact policy. In talking to John Shockley, he said in the P3 contract, it has this policy that we will go up to 400 miles. So it is not, I guess I'd like the minutes to reflect, it's not a local DA policy, it's just the P3 policy. We have just in our, I think our policy as a DA board have said we're strongly recommended to use local contractors. And John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that we have any specific policy that says choosing the local contractors by the DA authority goes up to 400 miles.
I'm most familiar with the P3 documents. I guess I'd defer to Joel if we have a specific policy for the diversion, the overall diversion project.
Mayor Mahoney, Chairman Dardis, the Diversion Authority does not have a policy that provides any direction to that extent. No.
And so really the P3 came about, Chairman, with a joint conference with the two governors, and I'm pretty sure at that time, John, when you were drafting, we were very cognitive of trying to be polite to both sides. But the corrections in a minute would just do that unless, Mayor Dardis, if you wanted to say you brought in the Governor Walsh specifically, I thought it was more P3 policy.
All right, the suggestions have been made. Do you have a motion on that, Tim, as to how you want to change?
Well, just as I said, not Ireland, it's Iceland, and not bonding, but legislative issues would be going in for the North Dakota legislative issues, Don, is where I'd go there.
Yes, I will make those changes.
And then the other one was Iceland rather than Ireland. And I don't want to put words into Mayor Dardis's mouth about what Walt said. If you want to use that as the reason you did it, I thought it was more you're following P3 policy.
All right. Are there any additions to the minutes of February 24th?
Move to approve as corrected.
Thank you, Mayor Mahoney. Is there a second, please?
Steen.
Thank you, Commissioner Steen. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of February 24th as amended. Don, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Mayor, for your help. Item number 3 is to approve the order of the agenda for March 24th as distributed. Are there any additions, corrections, suggestions?
Steen, move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner
Hendrickson,
Steen.
second.
Thank you, Commissioner Hendrickson. Been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as distributed for May 24th. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Item number 4 is the approval of the bills. Mr. Costin.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The bills total for the month, $1,492,343.53. Stakeholder reimbursements mostly on the list from almost all the stakeholders and a couple of legal bills. So I think everything looks good and we should move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Costin.
approve.
Thank you, Mr. Steen. Is there a second, please?
Mr. Chuck, I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Hendrickson. It's been moved and seconded to approve the bills as presented by Mr. Costin. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Next order of business is number 5 is the financial report. Mr. Costin.
Yes, on page 26 of the financial report, the 2021 spend is $8,513,623, and the cumulative total for the project today is $650,644,061. On the next page, the statement in that position, $101,531,251. And all the other reports are listed there in the same format as they have been in the past. That's the extent of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Costin. Are there any questions of Mr. Costin's on the financial report? Hearing none. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Next order of business is item number 6 is the Executive Director's financial report. Mr. Paulson.
Well, thank you, Chairman Dardis, members of the committee. Just want to, at a high level, I guess, at this point, at the end of the month, last month, we've spent a total of $655 million. You can see the breakdowns. Obviously, we're just starting the year here, but we are tracking expenditures as expected under the 2021 cash budget. Again, just like the previous few months, a majority of our expenditures are in the lands and impacted property mitigation category. We continue to make progress. Mr. Dodds has a lands report to briefly give to the committee later on in the meeting, so I won't talk about that too much. And then again, following the lands program would be the engineering, legal, financial. Majority of those costs related to ongoing engineering work with the Corps of Engineers projects, as well as the P3 procurement. Move to the next page, please. Thank you. So we can see here the management, legal, financial, procurement. We've expended approximately $1.2 million. No other significant real expenditures on this page here. I'm going to move to the next. Likewise, here nothing that large in the other mitigation projects or the in-town flood control projects. Of course, moving into the land acquisition and mitigation, you can see where a majority of our expenditures are going. Most of those dollars, the 14 million, is going to land payments for property related to the diversion channel. Next page, please. And then the other category, engineering and design fees, you can see a breakout of where the engineering fees have gone through the end of February. So if there's any questions on that, I can take those now.
Mr. Paulson.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to also just talk a little bit about the program dashboard. This was a request from the Finance Committee last month, and I worked with the PMC to and the City of Fargo to develop something that I believe is going to be extremely beneficial for the Finance Committee in moving forward with the plethora of activity that we are going to have. So what you see before you is going to be a link that will be provided to each of the Finance Committee members and the board members, and they can go in at any time. This will be updated on a monthly basis prior to the Finance Committee meetings and the packet production. So as you review your packet, you will be able to also dig into the different areas of the budget and review to ensure that the items before you either fit in the budget or our budget overruns that need to be discussed and talked about at the Finance Committee. So this provides the overall program budget and expenditures to date on this first page, program spending performance and expected costs per funding source on the right-hand side of your screen. It is the 2021, or it will be the annual cash budget, and it will also provide you a link to the key activity schedule as well, so you can compare budget with the scope of work that is currently being done. Next page,
Mr.
please.
If you'd like, I can go, if you give me a second to switch screens, I can actually go and give them a quick preview of this dashboard if you'd like me to.
Yeah, Paul, if you could, that would be excellent.
Okay, this is the actual dashboard. So there are 4 pages, as Executive Director Paulson stated. Within all of these, this is the growth curves that's been developed for the total program. The first page is for the total program, so you can see our total spend to date is that $650 million that was previously discussed. These can also be drilled down into our level 2 discussions and starting to look at some of the longer term on the program level. And then on the second page, this is for the 2020 budget. The similar type look here, where each one of these, you can see the spent to date compared to the total budget. And then also these can also be drilled down into the level 2 categories to see, provide a little bit more detail. We can also provide individuals the next level down if there's questions or people want some more information. We can provide that. It just became too cumbersome on the website, so we wanted to at least give you this information, and we can drill down further if you'd like. The third page, as was explained, just gives you a good key overview of the schedule and where we're at from anything from the legislative session to the core construction projects, and then some of the lands and mitigation and where we're at with the P3 with proposals being due. So that's just a very brief overview. As Executive Director Paulson said, we will be providing this link to the Finance Committee for your use. These are updated on a monthly basis. So these are currently showing through the end of February as was shown in your packet.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. And then the second part of our kind of revamping and trying to make the finance committee jobs easier is a change to the executive director contracting recommendation forms that are provided with each contracting action. And Paul, if you could bring up an example of what we intend to provide starting next month in the finance committee packet, and I'll go over what that looks like. We're not seeing anything yet, Paul.
I'm having some technical issues here, Joel. Give me just a second.
Okay.
I'd just like to say that thank you to Joel and Paul and all those involved in the creation of this dashboard. It's exactly what we've been asking for, and actually, it's actually a little bit better than what some of the suggestions that the finance committee made. But I think that moving forward as 2021, the amount of dollars that we're going to start spending now, with the bids coming in and all, that this was a critical piece of everybody understanding where we're at financially. So to all of you, thank you so very much.
Well, thank you, Chairman Dardis, for those kind words. We intended to bring a product that was easy to use, easy to navigate, but still have access to the complexity of the information related to the financing, as well as provide complete transparency on the financial accounting of the project. And I believe we have a product that will work. Obviously, we can tweak it as we move forward, and continue to look for suggestions from the finance committee members as they begin to use the product. We certainly have the ability to change user workflows and content to meet the needs of the finance committee. I think the second part of our budget transparency and kind of ease for the finance committee is really the addition of a few additional columns contained within the executive director contracting recommendation forms. And as I mentioned, every contracting action that the Diversion Authority does have an accompanying executive director contracting recommendation form. In the past, we didn't provide what the cash budget was in the table. And so this is just an example to take a look at. If you look where Paul's cursor is on the right-hand side under Summary of Budget Allocation Year 2021. So this would be a typical contract amendment that's being proposed for a budget or for a task order increase. We'll provide the estimated cost in the 2021 budget. And then we have an additional column next to that for the budget allocated for 2021. So you can compare where the task order is at. In this case, it would be an amendment for $50,000, bringing the total task order budget up to $100,000. And then the next column over would be the 2021 cash budget, or what we had allocated for this specific task. In this example, it was $200,000. And then the column next to that would be just the difference between the existing or amended task order subtracted out of the 2021 cash budget, and that would give you the budget remaining for 2021. Now, Finance Committee can recall any budgets contained within the 2021 cash budget is contained in the overall budget as well. So as long as there's budget remaining and was allocated for this specific task, the Finance Committee can be assured that it has been allocated already within the project and is contained within both the overall budget and the 2021 cash budget. So this will accompany all contracting actions here on out, and I believe this meets the comments that we received in the last meeting to allow the Finance Committee greater clarity as they review the contracting actions. But I'll stand for any questions or any constructive comments as well. Certainly looking to make your jobs as easy as possible, but still provide that transparency that we've always done. So,
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Are there any questions?
Mayor Mahoney, I just want to know, does this make Commissioner Steen happy?
Well, he's got his hand up, Mayor. So let's hear from Commissioner Steen if we could. Chairman
Good
Gardis.
question. Joel and Paul, thanks for looking at this, and we actually had an opportunity to look at this earlier before this meeting, and I believe that it's accomplished its objective, and so I appreciate that and the work you guys have done to get this taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Steen.
Any questions for Mr. Paulson with regard to the report? Moving on to item number 7, contracting actions. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Chairman Dardis. So let me pull up the contracting actions here. So this month we do not have any contracting actions for the Finance Committee or the board to review. I do have a large number of executive director approved contracting actions. I don't know if it is worth our time to go through these one by one, but most of the zero cost budget task orders are really for the increase of period of performance. And so they are existing contracts that we have consultants working on, but we are extending the period of performance and updating their task orders with the new 2021 rates for each of those consultants. So the other one, sorry, I'll go back one here. The other one here you can see for $44,000. That is for a property mitigation task order amendment number 7 for the removal packages that we currently have ongoing. On the next sheet here, you will see contracting action for program advisory services. That is an extension of our Deputy Executive Director contract with Mr. Nicholson, and provides for his continuing services. His previous task order was up this month, and so in order to keep him working, we've extended that contract out. And the last one to report out there is really just a $0 task order as well, just transferring some budget between some different subtasks. So with that, I guess I will take any questions related to any of the executive director approved contracting actions.
Are there any questions of Mr. Paulson on the executive director approved contract actions?
Mr. Paulson, Mayor Mahoney.
Yes, sir.
Are there any changes in Martin Nichols' rate, like a COLA or anything like that?
No, sir. The hourly rate remains the same. It's just an extension of additional time and for his services.
Thank you.
All right.
Please
If there's no
continue, Mr.
questions, I'll report out the Cass County Joint Water Resource District approved contracting actions. Almost all of these are related to appraisal services, and many of them are extensions of period of performance as well. Not anything too great to recall here, but all of these are contained within our budgets. So if there's any questions, I can certainly answer to the best of my ability.
Questions for Mr. Paulson on the Cass County Joint Water Resource Board contract actions? Please move on to the Minnesota, please.
Okay, and we do not have any MCC JPA approved contracting actions this month as well.
Any questions of Mr. Paulson?
Mr. Chair, I do have a question for Joel.
Please, Mr. Steen.
Yeah, thank you. Say, Joel, I know we haven't, looking at this, we just haven't seen a lot of contracting actions regarding the Minnesota JPA. Are we on track in Minnesota as far as land acquisitions and that type of thing, or where are we at? Because we just haven't had to really approve any actions with regard to that.
Thank you, Commissioner Steen. Great question. We are on schedule with the acquisitions in Minnesota. The reason we haven't seen much activity is we've only utilized consultant services for opportunistic purchases. And so if there's a landowner that wishes to move or sell their property and it's affected by our project, we will engage with them and go through the process of purchasing the property. Those properties in Minnesota are towards the end of our schedule. So the last portions of the southern embankment that will be constructed by the Corps of Engineers, starting as late as 2024, 2025, will occur in Minnesota. And so there's still quite a few years left before the property is going to be a necessity for us to acquire. And so we just haven't seen the same level of activity that we see with the Cass County Joint Water Resource District, given that we had to acquire all the channel properties by the time we received the bids here from the P3.
All right, thank you.
Yep, Mr. Dodds, go ahead.
Hi guys, Joel hit the nail on the head. The only thing I would add is that there are 4 properties in Minnesota that are impacted by the Red River control structure, and we are actively negotiating on those as we speak and driving towards a deadline of having those properties acquired later this summer. So,
thank you, Mr. Dodds.
You bet.
Any other questions of Mr. Paulson? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 8, other business. First order of business, the DA board approval, MOU, and agreement actions. Mr. Shockley.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. We have 2 agreements before you. The first is a MURA or MURA for Xcel Energy. And just briefly, the reason why we call it a MURA is it is regarding utility relocations in the southern embankment. The southern embankment is being constructed pursuant to a more traditional bidding process in which components of the project are designed and then bid out individually. And so we didn't need an MOU that would cover precisely all of the utility relocates, because as the designs come in, the concept is that the diversion authority would issue a task order to Xcel Energy to move the utility line 10 feet or 15 feet or 30 feet, depending upon the design. And so we wanted to have an overarching MOU for the southern embankment with each of the utilities, but it's a slightly different process than with the diversion channel and P3 construction. So it's you'll see several of these as there are several utilities in the southern embankment. This is one of the first ones that's coming through. And then the second item is an MOU with Weiser Township. We're working on MOUs along the diversion channel and the southern embankment. And so this really addresses how property interests are addressed, preliminary planning, engineering, design, construction, insurance, all of those kind of basic items, along with payment of lost tax revenue for a period of 10 years. This has been negotiated out with Weiser Township. We would expect additional township MOUs to be coming through. I can certainly answer any specific questions you have, but the team and myself have reviewed these, so just let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Shockley? These are both actionable items. So Don, would you please call a roll to approve these two items?
Probably should have a motion.
All right, Mr.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Mahoney. Second. Been moved and seconded. Don, will you please call a roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson, Mr. Hendrickson,
Aye.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Motion passes. Under item number 8, other business, the next order of business is the policy on the disposition and management of comprehensive project lands. Mr. Nicholson.
Yes, Chairman Dardis and members of the committee. My report is fairly short. The Lands Committee earlier today recommended that the policy as in your packet be forwarded to the Diversion Authority Board for approval, and we should see that in front of the Diversion Authority Board tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholson. Are there any questions of Mr. Nicholson?
I have a question. This is Steen.
Mr. Steen.
Say, Martin, did this pass unanimously in the Lands Committee?
Commissioner Steen, I believe that is the case. Dawn can confirm that, please.
Just curious. Because I know you guys worked on this a long time to try to get it right, so.
Yeah, I believe it was a unanimous pass by the Lands Committee.
Martin, it was.
Thanks.
This is Chuck. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Additional questions for Mr. Martinson? Or Mr. Nicholson, excuse me. This is an actionable item. A motion, please.
Mr. Chairman.
Peterson motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Peterson.
my question is, Mayor Mahoney, is if it's actionable item by the Lands Committee, why would we be an action policy on a land policy? Why would we have to do any action on it? Doesn't it go to the board for final approval? Because we didn't really, I mean, they are recommending this final policy. Why would both committees have to sign in?
Mr. Paulson, would you like to address that? I was told that it's an actionable item.
I think this is a great question, and Mr. Shockley can assist as well. I think that the policy is directly related to approximately $30 million worth of asset property. Due to the large size and the fiscal ramifications of the policy, I did feel it appropriate that the Finance Committee have an opportunity to weigh in. And so the intent was to have the Finance Committee review this from a fiscal policy perspective, not necessarily a lands management policy perspective. And I don't know, John, if you have any additional items to add to that.
I think that you answered the question very eloquently, Joel. I think there is some elements of fiscal policy here regarding the disposal of lands. You wouldn't necessarily need a recommendation from the Finance Committee, but given that it has such an implication for a large asset of the authority that will be sold over time, I think we thought it prudent to put on the Finance Committee agenda just to review from a financial standpoint.
So, Mr. Shockley, I'll be the devil's advocate. So if we decide we don't want to give any preference to adjacent landowner, and if that motion would pass, then what would go to the board authority tomorrow?
Well, I just recall that both the Land Management Committee and the Finance Committee make recommendations. So it would be up to the Diversion Board to resolve which recommendation it would go with. I mean, this is certainly if it's up to the board and you feel that you don't need to make a recommendation regarding the policy, it's certainly some within your purview as board. It's not a direct, not directly like approving a bill or a financial plan, but it does have some implications. So.
We've been following mitigation plan for a long time, and we've been financing and approving the funding. It just seems to me that as you set this up originally as a DA authority, we have a land policy, they bring forth the policy, and what we're going to do is approve the purchases going forward. It seems like it's redundant to have the finance committee to try to redo the land committee policy. So it just seems clunky that we'd have both committees weigh in on it.
Chair recognizes Mr. Steen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I understand maybe the clunkiness, but I also agree with John on this perspective, and I would suggest that the Finance Committee, and I'll move that the Finance Committee recommends approval as well as the Lands Committee to the Diversion Authority Board of this.
Is there a second, please?
Policy.
Is there a second, please?
Peterson, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Been moved and seconded. Being we've had some discussion on this, is there any further discussion?
This is Mr. Costin. I had a question.
Please, Mr. Costin.
On section 2.12, market value is defined as excess land by appraisal, real estate market assessment, or other methods acceptable to the executive director. Well, what does that mean? It would seem like these lands should be valued and appraised. And so I'm just wondering why that additional language has been added to give preference to the executive director.
Mr. Shockley or Mr. Paulson?
I can probably take a stab at that. We threw that language as approved by the executive director, and there are a number of odd-shaped remaining parcels that may not be easily valued, like a quarter section of land or 40 acres. That's pretty easily valued, but there may be some excess parcels where there's a levee wall or earthen levee, and you have a triangled piece of property that maybe is 5,000 square feet, and the neighbor wants it and is willing to pay, 50 cents a square foot or something. It probably doesn't pay to have an appraisal done for that property. And so we wanted to have a safety valve for those odd shaped parcels. I don't, Martin, do you have anything to add?
Commissioner Steen, thank you, Mr. Shockley. I think you answered that appropriately. That is the reason that is in there. It gives the executive director flexibility in those cases where the cost of an appraisal might exceed the value of the land. So it just allows some flexibility in those cases. I would expect the executive director, and I can't speak for Mr. Paulson, but I would expect most of those to be done by appraisal or real estate market assessment as listed.
Mr. Costin, does that answer your question, sir?
Thank you for that explanation.
Mr. Steen, you have your hand up again?
Yeah, I meant to take it down, but I do have just a follow-up question. I didn't necessarily read this thoroughly for the third time, but does the authority have to approve any sales then, Mr. Shockley? I think you're muted, John.
Sorry. Under the JPA, for properties that are purchased with diversion dollars, the board would ask for a property to be disposed of. So to answer your question, yes, I mean, in determining to move forward with the sale and consenting to it, that's why we wanted to develop this policy. And we recognize that, there's different jurisdictions, they have different rules and think that's why we tried to put a lot of time into this policy.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none. I'd entertain a motion, please.
I think you have a motion and a second
I have a
already.
motion. You're right, excuse me. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Yes.
Mr. Crafton,
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Motion passes. Item C under other business is the property acquisition status report. Mr. Dodds.
Good afternoon, committee members. In your packet is the usual status report. Paul, if you can just go to the next page, I'll just hit on a few items there. On this page here, you'll notice that we continue to make some progress. We have 550 what we've called as acquired properties. That basically means we're done dealing with that property, whether we've acquired it in fee or the temporary easements or whatever might be necessary on those parcels. You can also see that there's 88 parcels listed as acquired via last resort eminent domain. Those are properties that unfortunately we've had to file a quick take action. We are starting to get some discovery requests, and Chris McShane and his team are handling those and processing through the steps there. We have a handful of purchase agreements that are signed and waiting to close. We have 78 parcels listed as in negotiation, meaning that we've got an offer made and we're negotiating with those property owners. The majority of those are for the Red River control structure and the Drain 27 wetland project. And so we're staying in coordination with the Corps as they're anxiously awaiting us to get those acquisitions completed. And then just to touch on the sort of orange shaded area in the upstream mitigation area, we have an appraisal process underway with Crown Appraisals, and that process is ongoing. Will likely take most of this year before they're done with all of that appraisal work. The next page touches on the environmental monitoring easements. So this is for easements that support the Corps' program of measuring and monitoring biotic and geomorphic conditions across the region. So we have been successful at securing over half of those easements so far. We did have some neighborhood meetings yesterday and Monday this week for North Dakota property owners, and similarly meetings set up for Monday and Tuesday next week for the Minnesota property owners. I'm sorry, North Dakota this week. Next week is Minnesota. And so we are making some progress on that. And then the remaining pages of the report just drill into more detail of each one of those segments. You'll notice on those segments, Paul, if you go to the next page, for example, there is a report on the, I'm sorry, that's not included, but anyway, there's more detail as necessary if you want to drill into more information, but these summary pages provide, I guess, the high level overview. So with that, I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dodds. Questions for Mr. Dodds? All right, hearing none. Item D, an update of the from Jennifer, MFDA organizational chart.
Hey, Mr. Chair, I can take that.
All right, Mr. Paulson.
Thank you. This was presented last month. Just an update of the names and email and contact information for the board members and the committee members. I think it was at the board meeting last month where it was mentioned that some of the emails should be changed to the specific county or entity email, and then I think the Fargo emails were in old format. So This is really just re-presenting the information from last month with the updated and corrected information, for the board. And then the next sheet would be the Metro Flood Diversion Authority leadership teams, contact information, and roles. And then the final one is the key consultants for the different sectors of the FM or the Metro Flood Diversion Authority. So more for your information, but I did want to get that information corrected and back in your hands. So.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Are there any other corrections that need to be made to that list of the organizational chart? All right. Our next meeting is April 22nd. Is there any member of the Finance Committee that has something they'd like to bring forward at this meeting? Anything additional that you'd like to discuss? Hearing none, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Peterson motion.
Commissioner Peterson moves, Commissioner Steen seconds. We stand adjourned. Thank you.